Lord Almighty. Let's get tuned up. Let's also wait, does it autoplay ads? I thought I have ads disabled in the creator dashboard, but does it automatically hit you with one no matter what? Interesting. I guess my ad blocker, I use uBlock Origin and Firefox. It must catch them because I don't get them. Unless maybe you're watching on your phone or watching in the Twitch app. All right, so let's see. We need to update guitar command. And what, boy? Check that out. Alec being a beast. You can have a hyper lost. It's all gonna be hyper something. Anybody actually look into what game this hyper business is promoting? Yeah. No, that's right. I remember somebody saying it was some kind of battle royale. Set that to its notch there. Okay, so let's see. We got CloudBot up. We are going to change guitar to. This is a come back Numlock 94 Fender Strat Ultra. Not to be confused with the current Strat Ultras, which are very, very different guitars. Then amp's still the same, pedals are almost the same. Just need to add Caroline Kilobyte delay. All right, that should be all updated. Oh goodness, forgive me. Nose is running a little bit. Still a little bit whacked out from having it soldered shut. But Grim, to your question in the Discord about how to dial in an 80s tone, I think this Wednesday, this is washed out Wednesday, so we'll be playing with pedals anyway. We'll actually go through that. We'll make that like part of our project is how to dial in 80 sounds either with individual pedals, or I have a couple old multi-effects lying around that I can hook up and we can kind of, I mean, they're going to be different from yours obviously because everyone has sort of a different interface, but we can kind of get an idea of how to work through it. Of course, the ones I have are from the 80s, so they just kind of sound 80s by default, but still. Plus, it might be cool to see what we can cook up, if we can come up with anything really cool out of these old retro multi-effects. Alright, let me go let Facebook know that I'm live. we're good there. But you're gonna like change the pickups in your kit before you even get it built? Let's see. So we need to boost our highs a little bit with this guitar. It's on the dark side. Versus yeah. So you got to consider. You've got to consider whether or not you want like, do you want noiseless pickups? Do you want hot pickups? Do you want vintage sounding pickups? If you want vintage sounding pickups, do you want them to sound like they're from the early 50s, the late 50s, the early 60s, the late 60s, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what your budget's going to be for them. There's a company here, I know they ship internationally, but I don't know how much it costs, called GFS, that makes really good pickups for relatively little money. Personally, I would probably be looking for something used, like some good Seymour Duncans or something like that used, but I don't know how accessible that is over there. Dang it, pick. This is the worst pick. Well, actually, it's the second worst pick to drop. I do have one that's even more invisible, which actually I have down here. Whatever you do, don't drop this guy, because it's pretty much gone. Haven't played with this pick in months. There we go. Make it a little glassier. Alrighty. Let's see. Let me get the chart loaded. Oh, I know that feel. I know that feel. Alrighty, this is probably going to eat the entire screen. Yep, going to eat the entire screen. Let's shrink that guy down a lot. Da-da. Yeah, I changed to a larger page size to hopefully make it more readable, but then I'm going to have to shrink it down and it'll probably become unreadable again. Just do it this way. Just It's probably better if you all just go download it from the Discord. I uploaded it to the chart section. But yeah, legibility is a problem. I think the once the better camera, once I get the better camera, I'm probably going to start off. I was going to get a Sony A6400, but with how much prices have escalated over everything, you pretty much wind up paying as much as new for a used one or a B stock one or an open box or anything. So I think I'm going to drop down to the 5100 because that still does clean 1080p, 60 FPS, and it looks like I can get one of those for a little under half of the 6400 used. Apparently they were super cheap before all this business, all this mess started. But once we do that, we'll have a bit more space to operate with, and so I can kind of manipulate things being on screen a little more without completely covering it up and or having to shrink it down too much. Let's tilt the camera down here. I've got no problem with bandwidth. You know, I want to improve my image quality as much as possible. Because I mean, I've got to start doing stuff. Got to start making stuff and editing things for YouTube as well. Because this is actually, I mean, this is a 720p camera in this laptop. It's just got a terrible sensor in it. You know, so the performance, even with the two big umbrella lights on me, the performance is kind of grainy and garbage. And so moving up to a much better camera will help. It'll get me a lot bigger sensor, a lot cleaner image quality. Let's see. Let me get the fan pointed at me. Plus I'll be able to take better photos of gear too for the Instagram. But everything has gone so crazy. That and the like I was talking about the other day, the PC parts. You know, I keep putting together computers on PC Part Picker, and then I come back the next day after I've done some research, and the parts are either out of stock or they've tripled in price. Yeah, I'm just using the default webcam in my laptop over here. Because when I decided to start, I went to buy a webcam, you know, back in late March, beginning of April, and webcams were just gone completely. You know, out of stock everywhere. I mean, that's pretty literally the fan I'm using, except it's from Target. I leave it oscillating most of the time, but once we're streaming and the lights are on and everything, I gotta fix it on me. Because otherwise I become a sweaty dude. What brand is it? Because the one I got is Holmes. As in like Sherlock Holmes. And it's really nice. It was like $42, I think. I think I need a little truss rod adjustment. Sounds like I'm getting a little back bow. You can hear that note start to buzz off the fret a tiny bit. Okay, so let's get warmed up properly. And this chart, the chart for tonight's lesson and topic, is connected to the last one we did for the modes and the one we did before that, I believe, for chord construction. It's essentially kind of a combination of the two. Uh, so if you don't have those charts, or you haven't, completely memorized them and watched the VODs for those streams, 50 times to make sure you've really internalized that information, that'd be beneficial to do. Alright, let's see. Where did it go? There it is. Ah, it's still way too big. So let's pull it down. I wonder if Rusty ever figured out, because he was wanting to do kind of the same thing, figure out how to show just like part of a source at once. Because really it'd be ideal to just show like one bar at a time. If I could just cut out like a little block at a time. Be super handy. Just put it across the bottom here. Yeah, there's got to be some way to do it. There doesn't seem to be don't seem to be able to do it like straight from just like the stream source panel here. But maybe there's some kind of modification or command or something you can do. To be able to like, even if you could fix the panel width or like the source width and then scroll the actual image up or down in the background to just show what you wanted, even that would be effective. But I haven't found a way to do that yet. Yeah, I don't think we're at the professional production crew stage yet. Alrighty. So, if we go back to when we talked about modes, we went through the 7 major modes. That is the modes that come from the major scale being the Ionian mode, right? And that's the one we're going to start with here. That mode chart, which you can also download in the Discord, has the, let me de-highlight or deselect that, there we go. Has the whole step, half step patterns as well, if you've forgotten those. But in the case of the Ionian, briefly, it's root, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. And that gives us the major scale. We're doing this in C, using C as the root tone. What we're going to do now is we're going to learn how to harmonize that, how to create a series of chords for the major scale and its modes that give us what's often called the major scale progression or the harmonized major scale, something to that effect. If you've ever heard someone, maybe me, but if you've ever heard anyone say, oh, that chord progression is a 2-5-1, or that chord progression is, a 1-4-5, or something to that effect, they're using ideas that come from the harmonized major scale. And it's something we'll hear quite a bit, like when I'm analyzing a song or breaking a song down or trying to learn it. I'll go, oh, okay, that went to a 1, to the 6 as a secondary dominant to, you know, a flat 7 major, stuff like that. I'm talking about how all of these chords relate back to the chords that come out of the major scale in its modes. And when someone talks about playing in the key, in a particular key, like the key of C major, they're talking about the notes that come from the C major scale and the chords that come from the notes of the C major scale. So, you know, if I say it's a 2-5-1 in the key of C major, I know right away that it's a D minor, a G, and then a C. And then by extension, the 7th, which we'll talk about in a future stream. Or if someone says we're playing a 2-5-1 then in the key of E flat, I know, oh, hey, that's an F minor, a B flat, and an E flat. So on and so forth. So that's what we're going to be learning to do tonight, how to find that. And eventually your ears start kind of hearing that too, which is when it becomes really, really, really handy. So, for starting with Ionian, in this case, starting with C as our root, root, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, giving us the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. We're going to build a chord from that C Ionian mode. And if you'll remember from the chord construction, the triad stream, when we talked about building these triads, these simple 3-note basic chords, we need a root, in this case a unison. If you go all the way back to the interval stream in the interval chart, we need a perfect first or a unison, which is just going to be the root note of the scale, in this case the C. Then we need a type of third, a major or a minor third, and we're going to take the type of third that occurs naturally in the scale. So if we follow the scale, we go root, okay, whole step gives us a major second, another whole step gives us a major third. So root, major third, and then we need a type of fifth. We're going to take the fifth from this particular mode as well. So perfect fourth, perfect fifth. So when we build a chord out of the C major scale, out of the Ionian mode, we get our root or unison or perfect first, whichever name you'd like to use, major third, perfect fifth. So we're skipping the second tone of the scale. We're skipping the fourth tone of the scale. Then the next tone would be an octave until we start getting into sevenths and extensions. This also, by the way, gives us the major arpeggio for the C major scale, because all an arpeggio is essentially breaking up the tones of a chord at its most fundamental level. So you can practice that as its own exercise. Now, if we want to play these as a chord, we have to get all 3 of them on different strings, and that requires us to think a little bit. You know, we start with this 3, then we have the 2, in this case the note E, 2nd fret on the D string. But that perfect fifth takes us to the 5th fret on the D string, so we have a little bit of a clash between these two. We have to transpose one to a different string. The easiest thing to do in this case is to transpose the 5th fret on the D string to the open G string. So the chord that's produced would be 3rd fret on the A, which is the note C, 2nd fret on the D, which is the note E, and open G string, which is the note G, obviously. Right? This gives us a C major triad, because C is the root with a major third and then a perfect fifth. G string is drifting a little flat. So the chord that comes from the Ionian mode, from the major scale, from the first mode of the major modes, is a major chord, a major triad. We're going to represent that with a Roman numeral 1. I wonder if I can get my... Let me see if there's a way to get my mouse pointer to show up on screen, because that would be useful for like pointing at this stuff and highlighting it. Let's see. Image, browser source, display capture. I don't really want display capture. Open VR, audio input, color, media, text, window, Video capture scene. I don't see anything. Hey, Yo Facade, what's up? There's got to be some way to do it without just capturing my entire screen. I should look into these things before the stream. The guitar is a little hidden right now. Sorry, hold on. This is a Strat Ultra in Mystic Black, which is kind of has a little green metallic sparkle in it. You can't really see it too well with the current camera, but it looks pretty cool under stage lights. All right, let's see. Let's get chart back up here. So when you hear somebody talk about the one in the context of a chord progression or a key, they're talking about the chord that's based on the first mode of that key. And when they're talking about major keys, they're talking about the Ionian mode or the major scale. Yep, lace sensors. It's got a blue in the neck, a gold in the middle, and then a red dually. Two of the reds wired together in the bridge that you can then split. You can choose either one of the coils or both together. And it has the TBX tone control too, so you can actually kind of boost your mids with it a little bit, which is kind of neat. And then the roller nut. This one has the LSR roller nut. The slightly earlier ones had a Wilkinson roller nut. And then the kind of weird Floyd Rose 2 locking bridge, which actually handles really smoothly, but doesn't have a lot of adjustability. But it's very clean, very polished sounding guitar. It doesn't chime like a Strat with traditional pickups in the same way. You know, the gold kind of gets there, but it's still much cleaner and more kind of full frequency. But really versatile guitar. Plays super fast, and in this particular example is really light too, which I like. Hey, wee baby, what's going on? So you continue your tradition of communicating almost exclusively in emojis. All right, so that would be our one chord in this case. C major chord. Note that the Roman numeral 1 in this case is uppercase. Uppercase indicates a major type chord, or at least a chord with a major third anyway. A lowercase Roman numeral, as we'll see with the next chord, will indicate a minor type chord, or a chord with a minor third at a minimum. And that's pretty important. All right, so let's see. Let's scroll up. Yeah, this is going to completely eat the stream. So let's move, since the modes are all available in a separate chart, let's pull it over to the side like this so we can see just the chords. And remember, if you need the chart is in the chart section of the Discord, so you can download it for your own use. And this stuff is effectively what I would be writing in my students' workbooks and stuff if we were doing, music theory lessons. So you could, take these and print them off and put them together in a binder and get yourself a nice little intro to theory book going. All right. So our second mode is the Dorian mode, starting on the second tone of the Ionian, if you'll recall. So that's going to give us a formula: root, whole, half, whole, 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 half, whole. There is some company, I can't remember what they're called, that makes pedals in ridiculous enclosures that look kind of like emojis. Like they make one that looks like an alien head and then it slides open and the knobs are on the inside. They make one that's like a skull. They make one, I think, that's a smiley face. But when we follow that same process based on the Dorian mode, using the D of the Dorian mode as the root note, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, we use it as the root and go, okay, well, 1, 2, 3. Here's our third, the note F, which is a minor third. Our 4 is a perfect fourth. Our 5, the A here, is a perfect fifth. So when we build a triad, 1, 3, 5, from the D Dorian, we get a D minor triad because root, minor third, perfect fifth. Compared to C major, C Ionian. Alec, dude, you are living large, helping out immensely, man. Here, take this hyper haste emoji. Now you guys have direct access to your favorite, in case you need a reminder. Oh, Lord. As well as my ugly face. Whichever one is more frightening. Right? But so we can hear the difference and we can hear a progression when we connect those two. The C major triad, the 1 chord, up to the 2 chord. We can hear them seamlessly linking together. And we can also play that again as an arpeggio exercise. With a number of different fingerings. Now, the shape that these produce on the fingerboard are really important too, because shapes are recyclable. You know, once we learn how to voice a chord in one fingering or one sort of fingering pattern, one little box on the neck, one shape, that's transposable as long as we move everything up and down the same amount. So we have this initial shape, this C shape, 3rd fret, 2nd fret, open string. We can mirror that a half step up and turn that into a C sharp major simply by adding 1 fret to everything. Then a D major, D sharp major, E major, F major, etc., all just maintaining that one little shape as long as we move each finger the same number of frets. And the same works with that minor shape, which is very similar. It's only 1 fret different from the major. All we're doing is lowering that major third to a minor third. That becomes a movable shape as well. So D minor, D sharp minor, E minor, F minor, and that starts to become kind of the foundation for lots of the little lead patterns that you hear, and like sweeping arpeggio patterns and things like that. Just using these tiny little movable chord shapes and extending them up and down the fingerboard in different ways and different combinations. Right, so Ionian, C, E, G, root major 3rd, perfect 5th, major chord, Roman numeral 1. Dorian, D, 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 F, A, root minor 3rd, perfect 5th, D minor, lowercase Roman numeral 2. Next, we move up to the Phrygian. Right? In the Phrygian, starts on the third tone of the Ionian. Remember, it's the most people associate it with a very Spanish or even Arabic sort of sound. And we're just going to do the same thing. We're going to take the root, the third, and the fifth of it. So 1 is the note E here. 2 is the minor second, so we're skipping that. 3, the note G, is a minor third. Right? 4 is perfect fourth, A. 5, the perfect fifth, is the note B. So for the E Phrygian, in the key of C major, we have E, G, and B. Root, minor third, perfect fifth. Another little arpeggio shape there. Now, because the E and G are on the same string, we've got to transpose one to a different string. So we can transpose the G, in this case, to the open G string. You get open G, E, and open G, and then we have to transpose the B then, the fourth fret, to the open B string, and we get this nice little common E minor shape, 2 O O. That would be equivalent to taking the previous D minor shape and moving it up 2 frets. But in this case, because of the position we're playing in, down here in this kind of second position, rather than jumping all the way up here to play this, we're going to keep it with the opens. And that becomes a movable shape too. Add 1 to everything, and there's F minor, F sharp minor, G sharp minor, A minor, etc. Which gives you kind of a shortcut to finding them in different keys. So we can hear 1 chord, Ionian, 2 chord, Dorian, 3 chord, minor, lowercase Roman numeral 3. Moving on to the 4 chord. Right, this comes from the F Lydian mode. Right, Lydian starts on F and simply follows the notes of the C major scale. F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F. Right, and we can kind of guess what type of chord this is going to be, never mind the fact that it's already written on the chart on the thing, but we can clearly hear that change where we're doing this minor sound in Phrygian to this big major sound here in Lydian. So we follow the scale, the 1, the root. There's the 2, major second, we're skipping it. There's the 3, major third. 4, augmented fourth. 5th, perfect fifth. So F, A, C. That gives us an F major triad. We transpose the C to the B string. And now we have this super common little triad shape, which is another movable one. 3, 2, 1. We start to see the outline of what's called the caged method in the fingerings that we use here too. This, for instance, would be an E shape. The C and D that we used previously would be C shapes, and we may see, I think I did the last one in an A shape, so we'll run into it too. Right? So, C, E, G, C major, D, F, A, D minor, coming from D Dorian, E, G, B, E minor, coming from E Phrygian, F, A, C, F major, coming from F Lydian. We move up to the 5 chord. Actually, I need to make a little revision to this. I need to add the chord names too, as in tonic, supertonic, etc. So I'll update that a little later and then add it back to the Discord. Right, so G mixolydian. We can hear that's another major sounding scale. If you'll remember, the mixolydian is just the major scale with a minor seventh added to it. So 1 G, 2, 3 B major third, perfect fourth, C, perfect fifth, D. We get the same shape as the F major, just moved up 2 frets, a G major chord. Right? So we have major, minor, minor, major, major. Right? Then we move up to the A aeolian, which is the minor scale, so you should hopefully be able to figure out what type of chord this is going to produce. 1, 2, 3, minor third, A, C, 4, 5, E, perfect fifth. Right? That gives us an A minor triad. Come on, strings. The shape this uses, we can see if you just know a regular open A minor chord, is the bottom 3 strings of that open A minor. Because all we're doing with these larger chord voicings is repeating the tones that are created, or the tones that occur in the original triads. So we have A, C, and E for an A minor triad. When we play this, we're playing A, E, A, C, E. We're simply duplicating the A and E in a lower register. The same with, say, this G. We had G, B, D for a G chord. G, B, D, G, D, G. Or this fingering, G, D, G, B, D, G. Or whichever fingering we prefer to use, we're simply repeating those in different pitch ranges and stacking them. So, the 1, C major. 2, Dorian, D minor. 3, Phrygian, E minor. 4, Lydian, F major. 5, Mixolydian, G major. 6, Aeolian, A minor. Now we get to the 7 with the Locrian, and it's a bit different. The process is the same, but the type of chord it produces is different from any of the previous ones. Right. So, Locrian, when we talked about it, we said it was a half diminished type of scale. And we can sort of hear that. Because we wind up with this diminished fifth, but then a minor seventh. To be fully diminished, it would need a diminished seventh as well. But that means the type of chord that it produces is not going to be major or minor, it's going to be diminished. When we follow root, half, whole, that gives us a minor third. So our Roman numeral is going to be lowercase. Whole, half, diminished fifth. And the type of triad, which had a minor third and a diminished fifth, was a diminished triad, which we just used the degree sign for. I've put the diminished in parentheses there, so you'll remember that the degree sign means diminished. But in most cases, you'll just see that degree sign. And we put that next to the Roman numeral as well. So you have a lowercase Roman numeral 7 with a diminished symbol next to it, which tells us it's a minor third with a diminished fifth. So, 1 chord, major, C major. 2 chord, D minor. 3 chord, E minor. 4 chord, F major. 5 chord, G major. 6 chord, A minor. 7 chord, B diminished. which we can hear is very, very, very tense. Our brain is telling us, please resolve this. Please, please, please don't stay on this. Please resolve this somewhere. So I'm going to stay on it for a while to annoy you. Fun tricks you can do with diminished chords. They're infinitely invertible, so as long as you move them in minor thirds, you can kind of take the shape and move around, which is an Yngwie trick. Right, those diminished arpeggios, they're just taking the little diminished chords, little diminished triad shapes like that, and moving them up in minor thirds, up or down. So if we start off in this one, slide up a minor third, come down, same shape. Come up a minor third, same shape, come up a minor third. So you really, 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 really easy, and then all of a sudden you sound like you've got some shred licks. Because diminished triads are symmetrical. I think we talked about that a little bit when we talked about how to build the triads way back when. How diminished and whole tone scales and the chords that come from them are symmetrical. Right? So, we hear how tense that is. That wants to make us resolve back to the one. And so the last chord I've written here is actually just the one chord again. So we can see how it cycles back to the one. We're an octave higher than we started with in this case. And that's going to produce a slightly different fingering, this more A-type fingering, if you can visualize, like, say, an A bar chord for your C shape. So we can hear one chord, major, Ionian mode, two chord, minor, Dorian mode, three chord, minor, Phrygian mode, four chord, major, Lydian mode, five chord, major, Mixolydian mode, six chord, minor, Aeolian mode, seven chord, diminished, Locrian mode, and then back to the one chord, major, Ionian mode. Right? That's how when you hear someone say, oh, this is a 2-5-1 in the key of C, that's how someone knows what that means. Someone knows that you're supposed to play a D minor, and then a G major, and then a C major. Because the 2 in the key of C major is D minor. And it's always going to be a D minor something. Even if someone says, oh, it's a flat 2 as a 7-sharp 9 chord, then you go, well, okay, well, the 2 in the key of C major is D minor. So if it's a flat 2, it must be D flat minor. And if it's being played as a 7-sharp 9 chord, it's D flat 7 sharp 9. So we can make all of these modifications relative to this base set of 7 chords. The major 1, the minor 2, the minor 3, the major 4, the major 5, the minor 6, the diminished 7th. Now, if someone talks about playing in a minor key, that gets rearranged a little bit and adjusted a little bit, which we'll talk about in the future. I haven't made a chart for the minor one yet. It's almost the same as the major, but though we would start on the 6 and use the 6 as the root, the starting point. But there is one important tweak that's conventional, at least. But so anytime someone gives me a song to listen to, like, people always go, holy crap, I can't believe you're figuring out this song this fast, this, that, and the other. A big part of it is just knowing this basic outline of chords. You know, is knowing that, like, okay, I know what it sounds like to go from a 1 chord to a 3 chord. So if we're doing that, that'd be a C to an E minor. That's a unique sound. Or in a different fingering, in a different voicing. So when we listen to something, the first thing I'm listening for is some cue like that. I'm listening for, okay, that's starting on the root and it's going to the 3 chord, or it's going to the 5 chord, or it's going to, you know, the 6 chord, but the 6 chord is flat, or it's, you know, doing this, that, or the other. You know, so Another common chord progression, the sort of what's called the 50s chord progression, is the 1, 6, 4, 5. Right, so that's kind of an archetypal progression. That's one that is incredibly common, that you've heard in a million songs, and you still hear in a million songs, though not necessarily played with that particular right hand rhythm. Yeah, pretty much. A million songs. But when something plays, I'm listening for cues. Like, okay, I know what it sounds like to go from 1 to 6. All right, and if I hear this instead, I go, oh, hey, that went from the 1 to the 6, but the 6 was made into a 7 chord because that makes it a secondary dominant, and that means it's probably going to go to a D after that because there are conventions. Like if a chord is treated or used in a certain way, it has a certain number of places it tends to go. And that gives you ideas, that gives you ways to sort of anticipate in your head like what's likely to happen, and then when you hear it, it either conforms to that or it doesn't, and then you hear it in relative to that, like how did this not do what I expected it to do based on the conventions of the way Western music is played. So like if it goes to this and I go, oh, I played the 6 as a major chord, so it's probably going to go to D minor, and then instead of going to D minor it goes up to B flat major. I hear like, okay, wait, so instead of this resolution, ba, ba, instead of da da, I got da da, right? And so I create this kind of system in my brain where like I can link series of expectations, different types of connections, and then when something isn't one of those, I can hear it relative to the ones that I expected. Okay, this, instead of moving this far up, instead of moving up a perfect fourth, this moved up a minor second. This tone moved up X, X number of tones or scale tones. That gets into something called voice leading, which we'll talk about down the road, how the tones sort of move and connect to each other internally inside of the chords in important ways, which lets you make chord progressions that sound like they're linked together in smooth or interesting ways. But it all comes from knowing this basic kind of set of chords, knowing what the chord progression for the harmonized major scale is. The 1 chord, major, 2 chord, minor, 3 chord, minor, 4 chord, major, 5 chord, major, 6 chord, major, 7 chord, diminished, 1 chord, major. Now, each one of these also have a name, and that's what I was mentioning earlier. I'm going to tweak the chart and add these to the chart because I forgot to put them on. I knew I was forgetting something. And I'll re-upload it to the Discord so you can download it. But the 1 chord is known as the tonic. And you've probably heard that term before. Tonic is used kind of interchangeably with the word root. And basically all of Western music is searching for different ways to resolve to that tonic or to avoid resolving to that tonic as you start to get into late 19th century and 20th century music and contemporary music. If you've heard the word cadence used before, you're going to get banned. Alex is going to ban you for like 10 seconds. Oh, Lord. Tonic simply means it is of the tone, basically. It sounds the most kind of consonant. It sounds the most resolved, the least tense, right? So if we play a chord progression, we demonstrated this a couple weeks ago, I think, in a stream, where like if I play a 1-4-5 progression, even though they're all major chords and should all be consonant, when I go to that 5 chord, if I just stay on this 5 chord, it's going to start bugging you. Like your brain is going to go like, please, 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 please resolve this chord, please. And when I go back to that one chord, it all goes, oh my gosh, and like it lets you breathe finally. Right. So the 5 is creating tension, and it resolves to the tonic in what's called an authentic cadence. 5 1 5 1. That's the strongest tension to resolution. Ba 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 ba. We also have something called a plagal cadence, which resolves from the 4 to the 1, from the 4 to the tonic, which is a little softer, not quite as tense or strong. That's our good old Amen. Or back when we did the Fleetwood Mac stream, that's the albatross chord progression essentially. 4 1 4 1. Or anytime you've heard any song that does this, it's like a million Rolling Stones songs. That's a 4 to 1 type of progression. In some cases, it's using the 1 as a suspended 4 chord to imply the 4 to 1, but it's still essentially a plagal cadence. It's a 4 1 type of sound, right? They're all resolving to the tonic. They're creating some amount of tension and then resolving to the tonic. The 2 has a very literal name. The minor chord based on the Dorian is called the supertonic because it's above the tonic. So we have tonic 1, supertonic 2. The 3 chord, on the other hand, has a unique name. It's called the mediant. And it's called the mediant because it's the middle point between the strongest resolution set. It's the middle point between the tonic and the dominant. The dominant we'll see as the 5 chord in a few minutes. Right? So if we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the median is that halfway point, hence the name median, which means it plays an important role in terms of harmonic progression. Right? The 4 chord, in this case the F major, is called the subdominant, which is why its cadence is plagal and not authentic. Plagal as in false, essentially. Not as strong as the dominant authentic cadence. So the 4 is the subdominant. It's directly below the dominant, nor is it as strong in terms of tension and resolution. The 5 chord, in this case the G major, is the dominant. And this is, again, like the fundamental idea of Western music, more or less, is how do we get from the 5 to the 1 or from the 1 to the 5 in interesting ways? Or again, later, how do we try to avoid doing that in interesting ways? Right? We can hear how strong that ba-da, how much it wants to pull us from up from that dominant chord back to the tonic chord. So 1 tonic, 2 supertonic, 3 mediant because it's the middle point between tonic and dominant, 4 subdominant, 5 dominant, 6 submediant. Now it's kind of a weird name. You'd think like, okay, submediant, that should be below the mediant, right? Well, the mediant was like E, and then so that means this A is below, but it's not really below it. That's like, multiple scale tones away. And it seems like we're going up in this particular case as we make our way through the chord. So why is that the submediant? Any guesses? Not everybody all at once. I can hear the keyboards clicking and searching for Wikipedia pages from here. Yes, Alec, the theory atheist. All right, well, something in Latin? Yeah, kinda, I guess. So, the mediant was the middle point between the tonic, the 1 chord, and the dominant, the 5 chord. The submediant is the middle point between the tonic and the subdominant. Now, that seems really strange to think of, right? Because you'd think like, okay, well, wait, here's the tonic, and here's the supertonic, and so wait, why isn't this? Well, no way, that doesn't make sense, right? You would think it would be this, but we're actually looking at it relative to the approaching tonic, the next tonic, which is why I included the octave of the tonic down here, essentially like the 8, so to speak, the 1 being equivalent to the 8. The submediant is the halfway point between the subdominant, the 4, and the next 1. So if we're here, we can hear it seg smoothly into those chords, much like if we go tonic, mediant, dominant, we hear them connect to each other in a very smooth manner. We hear that same sort of relationship with subdominant subdominant, submediant, tonic. It's the halfway point between the 4 and the 1 again, aka the 8. We have 1 chord in between on each side of it, the 5 chord and then the 7 chord. So, 1 tonic, 2 supertonic, 3 mediant, 4 subdominant, 5 dominant, 6 submediant. Then the 7 chord has a unique name. That diminished triad is called the leading tone. And we can hear that pretty clearly why it gets that name, because if we sit on it, much like the 5 chord, it makes us want to go, oh, thank you for resolving me. It leads us back into the 1. Ba, 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 ba. So, ba, ba, ba. Tonic, 1. Supertonic, 2. Mediant, 3. Subdominant, 4. Dominant, 5. Submediant, 6. Leading tone, 7. Back to the tonic, 1. Every one of those chords, and it's up to you to do this work and to make this determination and kind of understand this in your own internal language, your own way of thinking about it. But every one of these chords has a way to hear it moving to any one of the other chords. So one way to start doing this, to start learning this, is to take the 1 chord, the C major, in whichever fingering you prefer, and then just to move to each of the individual chords, both sequentially and alternating directly back and forth to the 1 chord. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 1, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That way, C, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, B diminished, C, C, B diminished, A minor, G, F, E minor, D minor, C. And we hear ba da 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 da, you know. Start to hear songs like that come out of it when we do that. But then alternate, play like, okay, 1 chord, C major, to the 2 chord, D minor, 1, D minor, 2. And we start to hear a specific relationship emerge from that 1 chord to the 2 chord, and then the 2 chord back to the 1 chord. Ba, ba, ba. It tends to sound like we're elevating the tones of the 1 chord. Even if we were playing the 1 chord in a higher pitch range, it still sounds like we're increasing the tension. We're raising it up, tightening it up, and then when we go back to the 1, it releases that tension back down. The 1 chord to the 3 chord. It's a little smoother change. It's not as forcible or as tense as this 2 chord. Really makes you want to go ba ba or ba ba ba. The 3 chord, on the other hand, shares a lot of tones. The mediant shares a lot of tones with the 1 chord. So it's not as tense, it's not as strong, and it just wants to resolve like up a half step to something like this, and then back down to the 1. And when we hear it, it sounds almost a little more melancholy. Compared to right? Then we do 1 to 4. If you can't recognize 1 to 4 after a little bit of practice, then man, your ears need work. Literally every Velvet Underground and Lou Reed song. Heroin. Right? And a million other things. One has more major and the other more minor. Not really. I mean, if we look, the 2 chord contains 1 minor third and 1 major third. The 3 chord contains 1 minor third and 1 major third. I don't want to say the more correct explanation, because that's not really the right word, but the more technical explanation is because the 3 chord is the 1 chord as a major 7th in the first inversion, which I know is really, really clear and really useful to you right now. But the tone that is added to make the 3 chord into what it is, into a minor triad, is the note B in this case, When we played the 1, we had C, E, and G. When we play the 3, we have the E and G from that. But then we have this B added to it. So what our brain hears in a certain sense is actually that 1 chord, that C major, as a C major 7. Because when we add the B to a C major triad, we get C major 7, which has kind of a jazzy, slightly less bright and happy sound than just a plain C major. Versus one to 4, on the other hand, tends to be pretty happy sounding, pretty positive. Depending on how we treat it, it can be very sentimental too. If we give ourselves a little. Which is why we have that association with it being called the Amen cadence or the Amen change. It's used a great deal in liturgical music, in gospel music, and hymns, because it's a much less tense sound than the dominant to the 1. Ba, ba. So that's 4 to 1. 5 to 1 is going to be a lot more aggressive, or 1 to 5. The 5 doesn't want us to stay on it anywhere near as long, because the 5's job as the dominant is to resolve us back to the 1. Ba, ba, ba. And the 5 contains many of the tones of the 2. So when we talked about how the 2 was more tense sounding than the 3 in this case, the 5 and 2 share a great number of tones, and so they both create a greater number or a greater amount of tension to resolve to the 1. So 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 4, 1 to 5, 1 to 6. These are going to seg with each other very smoothly, because these, again, much like the 3, share 2 tones. So the C major is C, E, G, the A minor is A, C, E. All we're doing is replacing the G with the A. And you can kind of infinitely cycle back and forth between them, and it's going to sound really smooth and consonant, which is, again, why it was so popular back in the 40s and 50s. Still popular now, but usually in a little bit different order. In fact, if you want to make like a contemporary pop song or country music, you just need the 1, the 6, the 4, and the 5 in various configurations, and you've got it. So 1 to 6. Right? 1 to 7. And here's another really tense one. It's very rare that we stay on the 7. The 7 almost always is going to be going down to the 6 or to the 4 or somewhere else. It's going to be taking us somewhere because it's the leading tone. It's not really a chord meant for us to linger on. And much like the 5, it shares a number of tones with that 5 chord and then with that 2 chord. So that little sort of circle, the 2, the 5, and the 7, share 2 tones apiece, and all of them create more tension than most of the rest of the chords and want to be resolved more strongly than the rest of the chords. So we can sort of hear that relationship. 1 chord to 2 chord. 1 chord to 5 chord. 1 chord to 7 chord. Now if I play all of those, if I extend those into 7 chords, that becomes even more apparent. 1 chord to 2 chord. 1 chord to 5 chord. So we can hear that 7 is the same note in both of these chords. It just changes function from the minor 3rd to the minor 7th. And there's our classic jazz 2 5 1 bum, then 1 chord, 7 chord, 1 chord. Then I can start to hear those transitions. 2 5 5 7 1. If I voice the, if I were to voice, say the 7 chord slightly differently, like, how are we going to do that? This way. Ba, 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 ba. We start playing connect the dots between the chord tones, and then we start to get smooth sounding chord progressions that link into each other in interesting ways. So once you've learned, okay, tonic, 1 chord major, 2 chord minor, 3 chord minor, 4 chord major, 5 chord major, 6 chord minor, 7 chord diminished, and then tonic, supertonic, mediant, subdominant, dominant, submediant, leading tone, and you start playing these exercises. 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 4, 1 to 5, 1 to 6, 1 to 7, 1 to 1. In different fingerings and different voicings. Find as many different ways to play that as you can. Then try going 2 chord to 3 chord, 2 chord to 4 chord, 2 chord to 5 chord, 2 chord to 6 chord, 2 chord to 7 chord, etc. And use each one of those to link to the other chords, and you'll start to pick up, like, okay, oh, that's just a 2 chord going to a 4. That's just a 3 chord going to a 6. That's just a 2 chord going to a 5. That's a 1 chord going to a 7 chord going to a 6 chord. That's a 1 chord going to a 4 chord going to a 6 chord going to a 5 chord. That's a 1 chord going to a 5 chord, going to a 6 chord, going to a 4 chord. That's a 1 chord going to a 3 chord, going to a 6 chord, going to a 4 chord. That's a 6 chord going to a 4 chord, going to a 1 chord, going to a 5 chord, which is save tonight. Fight the break of dawn, come tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll be gone, and a million other songs. You know, there's a very, very limited, in pop and rock music in particular, very, very limited, very narrow sort of scope of chord combinations. And the vast, vast majority, I mean, I'm talking 99+%, come out of these 7 chords, and more specifically come out of 4 or 5 of these 7 chords. That's why I said if you wanted to write, all right, dude, I'll catch you on Wednesday. We'll play with some pedals, make some noise. Thanks for gifting those subs, man. That is awesome. Absolutely amazing. Right. But if you want to write, a modern pop song, take those 4 chords, 1, 5, 6, and 4. Yeah, mods are asleep pose. Here come all the unchecked YouTube links. All the tiny URLs. Right? So let's take a 1, in this case our C. Then let's take, a 5, a 6, and a 4. And let's get ourselves, let's get a little delay. And we'll play something like. Suddenly we have, at least half of the hit songs on pop radio for the last, 10 years minimum. Or we could do something like, we could start on the 4 if we really want to throw people for a loop. Up to the 6, 5, 4, 6, 5. Avoid going to the 1 until we get to the chorus. Have another little variation. You want your pop song to sound minor keyed. 4, 6, 5, 4, 6. And I'm reducing it down to just like the 1 and the 3 in this case. Because most of the modern arrangements for pop tunes tend to be a little more spare as far as the guitar parts go. Or they might pick a little pattern. They might. Have somebody come in, some singer who can go da 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 You know, pretty easy. Write some lyrics about how awful breaking up is. Something like that. You do pretty much the same thing and make country, contemporary country too. You need a little rockier sound on your guitar, bizarrely enough. Well, I blah 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 la da la da da blah da blah da blah da da blah blah da blah da 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 la la. Blah, 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 something about Jesus and my truck. You know, whatever you want. It's super, super, super formulaic, and it's just using those 4 chords that all come out of here. You move back to pop from the 50s and 60s, then again we get 1, 4, 5. Move to early punk, we get the same kind of thing, that 1, 4, 5 sort of progression. Older country tends to use variations of that as well. Right? Jazz, it tends to be centered around the 2, 5, 1. Even when we hear these more complex, this is 3, 6, which is actually a 2, 5, to the 2, 5, 1, 4, which is a 2 to the 5 of the 7. So we wind up with ba, 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 ba. And then we start substituting the chords, but we're still playing 2, 5, 1s. Right, so it's just all coming out with this relatively simple, a blah blah blah. I'm sure there is. I mean, you do have yeah 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 yeah. Ba da 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 da. Maybe that'll be a fun thing to do when we can actually record stuff on stream. We'll just write songs. We'll just pick a style, and then between me and chat, we'll come up with lyrics and melodies and stuff like that for the song, and we'll just write songs. See if we can sucker our way into a record deal. Pretty much all those big pop songs and country songs these days are actually written by groups of writers anyway, so it wouldn't be that different. Death metal version would be easy though, because you can just scream and no one would know. You can do a jazz version and just treat it like scatting. Ba da ba da da ba ba blah ba 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 blah blah ba do ba da da do da do blah 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 blah. You know, you'd easily get away with it there. But so start taking these chords, as I said, start working through them. Start working through them and sort of hearing their relationships to each other. And then you'll start to hear them come out in the music that you're listening to. Because again, virtually everything, at least if it's not atonal or not very contemporary sort of music, will be using these chords in very specific relationship sets to each other. And when they're modified, when they break from these kind of relationships, they tend to do it in specific and common ways. A common one is taking the 4 chord and borrowing the parallel 4 chord from the minor key, which is something we'll talk about in the future in more detail, where instead of playing F major, we would play F minor. So we get something like 1, 6, 4, 4 minor. Now let's get back to our clean sound. Let's get off the tube screamer sound. And then that'll almost always resolve back to the 1. But a super common sort of modification to the extant chord change, the chord progression that comes from major. Normally the 4 is major, we shift it to minor, and it resolves us back to 1. Once in a while it'll resolve us somewhere else, but almost always back to 1. And we can hear that, though, in relation to the default major sound. Right? Our brain gets used to hearing ba, 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 and then suddenly we go, oh, hey, that's interesting. Something happened. Something that is not the normal 4 chord occurred. We went from nice and bright and major sounding to kind of serious and minor sounding, and that creates more tension on the 4 to resolve back to the 1. What's up, wee baby? You got something to say? I didn't use the word blues scale for once. We're actually talking about different scales. It's a miracle. You know, other common things would be that sort of parallel chord idea. Borrowing from the parallel key is very common. So if we're playing in the key of C major, borrowing chords from C minor is a really common occurrence. So normally our 1 would be C major, our 6 would be A minor, and our 5 would be F. What'll happen a lot of times is we might go to the 1, then to the 5, and then instead of going up to the 6 as A minor, we might go to a flat 6 major, an A flat major, then a flat 7 major, a B flat major, then back up to the 1. So you get ba, 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 ba. Can you use it to play the blues? Absolutely. Like one of the most common, especially in the jazz world, if someone calls a blues, like if you're at a jam and someone says we're playing a blues, rather than playing this kind of 12-bar form that you would get at like a blues or rock jam, you're going to get something like this. 1, 4, 1, 1. Or you might get 1, 4, 6, 2, 5, 1, 3, 6, 2, 1, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. So that particular change, it's playing them all as dominant 7th chords, which is a blues convention, but the outline ba, 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 is actually coming from the major scale chord progression here. 1, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1, 4, sharp 4 diminished, 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. That 1, 6, 2, 5, 1, all is dominant 7ths, is also something called the rhythm changes, which comes from the tune, I got rhythm, I got music, I got my gal who could ask for anything more. And that's a super, super, super common thing, a set of changes to play over. Tons and tons and tons of tunes have used those changes. Now, if you mean just using the straight major scale by itself to play blues, doesn't really carry that sort of sound at all, because the blues is the sound of major and minor tones sort of clashing with each other or occurring at once, as in these dominant 7th chords and the juxtaposition of like the minor and major blues. If we try just playing the major scale, sounds a little Magoo, you know. It doesn't really have the kind of edginess that we want from a blues sound. You know, we have to start adding things in to make it sound bluesier. But we can certainly find blues chord progressions from this. And in fact, basically every chord progression from this or in relation to this, you know, in the way in which it differs from this particular set of 7 chords. Now, that starts kind of leading us into an even more important direction. You know, one of the most common questions that I get is, how do I solo? How do I come up with a solo? How do I make a solo, especially a solo that's not just playing the blues scale or the pentatonic scale, right? How do I make a solo that sounds interesting when there are more chords in a song than just, you know, the 1 and the 4 and the 5, or more chords that aren't just power chords? And this is the exact thing you need to know, because again, each one of these corresponded to a mode. So when we look at a song and we see, okay, it's got a chord progression. This chord progression goes 1, and then it goes 3, and then it goes 6, and then it goes 2, and then it goes 5, and then it goes 1. When I want to play on top of that, rather than thinking like, okay, this is in C major, so I'm just going to use the C major scale, which will be okay, the notes will work, but it'll sound kind of directionless, especially over the non-C major chords. I go, okay, well, wait a minute. We started with the 1, so I've got C Ionian. And then we went to the 3, so I've got E Phrygian. And then we went to the 6, so I've got A Aeolian. So when we're playing on top of the 3, the 6, the 1, the 3, and the 6, I'm thinking, okay, C major, E Phrygian, A Aeolian, and I'm playing the mode that aligns to the chord in the change, in the set of changes. And then when it changes to the 2, I go, okay, that's D Dorian. And then when it changes to the 5, that's G Mixolydian. And back to the 1, C Ionian. When you do that, suddenly you can hear the chord changes start to come out of the lines that you play. Even if you just play the scales really straight, like, okay, I'm going to just walk right up and down. Just by doing that, you can hear those chord changes in the scale, or in the particular mode, because that mode corresponds to that particular chord relative to the chord progression. That's called playing the changes. If you ever hear someone use the term playing the changes, that's what they mean. They mean adjusting the scale or mode that you're using to correspond to the particular chord in the chord progression. It gives us a much more directed and focused kind of sound. We start to hear the harmony be emphasized more versus just running up and down the scale, visualizing C as the root. Even though, again, all of those notes, we're just using those notes. We're emphasizing different tones as sort of the key and critical tones. When we get to that 3 chord and we're playing Phrygian on top of it, we're hearing like, okay, E is the root. And this is a minor type scale, da, 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 with that minor second. When we get to the 6th chord, we hear, okay, A is the root. When we get to the 2 chord, we hear, okay, D Dorian, D's the root, and we got that major 6. That gives us that Dorian sound. And when we get to the 5 chord, the G, we hear, okay, G Mixolydian. It's got that minor 7. And then back to the 1, where the Ionian. We start to bring out the sound of those chord changes in the lines that we play. All right, so that's another really important angle or aspect of understanding like the chords in the of a major key in the harmonized major scale. Because right off the bat, it gives you more information in terms of lines you can play, how to write melodies that fit, how to create cool sounding lines that don't sound like you're just running up and down one scale back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Then, you know, once you've got that down, you can start substituting in more stuff. You can start swapping in scales and modes that sub for those, you know, that share tones or share harmonic ideas. And then your solo playing and lead playing starts to become a lot more interesting. Essentially any song that you can pick, and basically every song we've done, you know, when someone's requested something here on the channel, I've approached from this sort of mindset. Right? I've sat and I've listened, went like, okay, where's the 1? Where's the 1? Where's the 1? Okay, there's the 1. So if the 1 is, you know, an A in this case, let's say we want to do it in a different key. If the 1's an A, I follow the major scale starting on A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. And I go, well, okay, that means that the 1 is an A major, the 2 is a B minor, the 3 is a C minor, the 4 is a D major, the 5 is an E major, the 6 is an F sharp minor, and the 7 is a G sharp minor 7 flat 5, or a G sharp diminished. And then back to the A major again. So then I simply listen for those same relationships. 1, 3, 1, 3, 4, 2, 1, 3, 4, 5. You know, I start to hear how those connect or how those are similar to they were, and then the other key, because they're always the same. Oh, thank you, Arthur. Let's see. See if I can read your name. Arthur Wynn Gleason. Thank you so much for following. Gleason? Is that what you're going for? But thank you for following. Thanks for hanging out with us. Having kind of a nerdy night tonight doing music theory. Right? But that relationship from the 1 to the 3 has the same quality, the same kind of sound it had when we did it in the key of C. Ba, 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 ba. If we do it in, you know, any other key, whatever key you want, if we do it in E flat, ba, 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 we hear that same relationship. And our brain eventually starts to pick up on that, and we start to hear it. We start to pull it out of songs, you know, as we're listening to something. Whatever it's going to be, our brain starts hearing, like, okay, that's 1, 3, 4, 5, you know, or 1, 6, 3, 4. Might recognize that one. You know, those relationships are constant regardless of the key you're playing in, regardless of which note you use as the root for your major scale, for your Ionian mode. It's just going to determine which particular notes wind up being in your chords, but it's still going to be major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, back to major again to start over. So we can transpose that, like when we were talking about how to write a pop song, 1, 5, 6, 4, doing that in C. Let's say we can't sing in C. Let's say we can only sing in the key of F. Well, okay, F major scale. Da, 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 let's see, so we're doing 1, 5, 6, 4. Now suddenly we have that same chord progression in a completely different key. Whatever it's going to be, we can start to make that transposition instantly. You know. Now we'll do a lesson. We'll do a music theory lesson on something called the circle of fifths. That might be the next one, the next music theory lesson we do in a couple weeks, because the circle of fifths lets you find those particular notes in a given key very easily. But you can always just do it manually. Just play the major scale on whatever root that you want to transpose to. Play the Ionian mode there, and then you can find the notes that you need for those chords. But it becomes just a matter of plugging in the notes for the chords in the key that you want to play in. All those relationships are the same. All of those relationships sound exactly the same. You know, a 2-5 in C sounds the same as a 2-5-1 in E flat. Sounds the same as a 2-5-1 in G. You know, we hear that same type of cadence, that same type of movement. And we know that, okay, we can use Dorian, Mixolydian, Ionian. You know, as we move through those chord changes to play on top of them, as complex or simple as they are. All right, coming up on 2 hours. That's probably pretty good for the basic lesson here. Does anybody have questions about that stuff, about that chart? Again, I'm going to update the chart and get it in the Discord once we get done here. But we still got another hour to go where we can just kind of talk about whatever. I can answer questions or we can mess around. There's the Discord. If anybody is not in the Discord. We can even talk about how to dial in your sound. Man, 96 followers. So close. So close. Come on. Oh yeah, absolutely. Doesn't care. So this stuff doesn't care at all about what instrument you're playing, what tuning you're playing in. All you have to do is compensate for the adjustments for the tuning that you're playing in. But the ideas are still exactly the same. They are independent of the tunings. You know, as long as you have an instrument that moves in half steps, 12 half steps per octave, then this system and these ideas apply. So say when we were learning that Sonny Landreth tune, this is a lot of what I was listening for when the chords would change. I'm listening like, okay, that went to the 1 chord, then it dropped down to the 7th chord, then it went back to the 1 chord, then it went to the 3 chord, the flat 3 chord as a major chord, then it went to the 4 chord. You know, I'm hearing those relationships. It doesn't really matter what tuning it's in. Because all the tuning is doing is changing the relationship from string to string. It's not changing the relationship to the musical system. So all this stuff, all the music theory really is a description of how things work in the musicals, in our musical system. You know, which is 12 tones, 12 semitones per octave, basically. so if you were playing in drop D, all you would have to do is adjust any note or any particular tone that you were working with on the low E up by 2 frets, right? Well, every artist is particularly creative using this because everything that has been created in Western music is using this. You know, even when you get into like 20th century atonal music, it's still able to be analyzed almost all the time in terms of how it rejects this or it avoids this. How it tries to break away from things like 5-to-1 resolution, uh, or how it tries to avoid using specific scales. It's not until you get into stuff where like the actual mathematical musical system changes, stuff like Charles Ives or some Henry Cowell stuff, things like that, where this starts to become less applicable. You know, where we're not using 12 tones per octave that are weighted or equally tempered. You start getting into things like just intonation and stuff like that, then things start to change, or mean tone intonation, or different systems of octave subdivision. When you get into Eastern music, the Arabic world and the Asian world, their musical systems use microtones and different types of subdivisions, where there may be 30 or more subdivisions per octave. And this are different notes completely. But unless you've listened to some pretty adventurous stuff, probably everything you've ever heard has used this idea. Has made use of this concept. It's almost inescapable. I mean, it's one of the sort of defining characteristics of Western harmony is the idea that we have this particular set of modes based on the major scale that are then harmonized further into chords and then extended and extended and extended into sevenths and ninths and thirteenths and broader harmonies, and then finding tricks and interesting ways to pass from one to the other or to write melodies that move from one to the other. So even if you listen to mid 20th century free jazz, early free jazz and stuff like Mos Dornet Coleman, it's still operating in this broader context. He's just paying less attention, or he's being less strict in terms of aligning particular sort of scales, making sure that they harmonize in pleasant ways. He's playing more freely on top of these sets of changes that come out of this, rather than rejecting the idea of constructing changes in this way altogether. Because it's hard to do. The instruments aren't made to do it. Or if you listen to Schoenberg of Webern, they're rejecting the idea of consonants, essentially, trying to avoid sounding consonant to sound like we're going 2, 5, 1. But it can still be analyzed in the context of this, because even when they play something that winds up to us sounding super random, we can still take that and measure it and compare it back in relationship to this standard consonance. And, there's a point in the case to be made that it only sounds dissonant and random in the context of familiarity with this type of consonance. That's getting into like meta musical analysis, though. Now remember, this is just like the stuff we've covered today is like, the really, 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 really basic stuff, the really introductory kind of stuff. You've got a lot to explore just with that before you even start getting into weirder stuff and more out there stuff, or trying to find ways to sort of bend and break and manipulate the system. It's one of the things uh, that always kind of amuses me a little bit. They'll talk about so and so, some musician or songwriter or something. Oh, they don't know any music theory. They don't know whatever. But if they're writing music on these instruments, they know music theory. They may not know what it's called. They may not know why it sounds the way that it does, but they are using ideas that can be described by music theory. Because it's purely descriptive. And in their own head, they have a system or a means for understanding and hearing the ideas and then translating them out on their instruments. Nose itching. Any more questions about this stuff? Or about music theory in general? We can go back some of the older stuff. I can ramble for, forever, basically. Or like I said, we can move on to dialing in a sound. The cage system? Yeah, dude, the cage system. So, the cage system, as I mentioned earlier, is kind of a byproduct of this. The shapes that are translated out onto the fingerboard when we build the chords, right? So the cage system is saying chords can always be reduced to a C shape, an A shape, a G shape, an E shape, or a D shape, right? And every one of those has a number of variations for extensions. So if we take, a D shape, we have a D minor shape, we have a D7 shape, we have a D major 7 shape, we have a D major 6 shape, we have a D add 9 shape, we have a D suspended 4 shape, we have a D suspended 2 shape, we have a D major flat 5 shape, etc., etc., etc. We have all of these variations of D shapes, and that becomes movable. So if we know this D shape, and we move everything up one fret, we now have D sharp, or E flat. We move it up another fret, we have E, and all of its variations. So E, E major 7, E7, E6, E minor 7, E minor, E minor 7 flat 5, etc. They're all based off of operating out of transposing these common chord shapes up completely. Now here's a G major 7, G major, G7, G minor 7 or G minor 11, G minor 7 flat 5, G minor. This would be a really awkward way to play this. G add 9. That's all it's doing. We construct a chord in one shape and then we transpose it all. So it's not a super complex thing once you can visualize the shape moving. So C shape, C sharp. So I went from 3 2 0 1 0 to 4 3 1 2 1. D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, etc., etc. A shapes. A sharp or B flat, B, C, C sharp, D, It's weird. I'm watching myself do this over here on this monitor and it's messing with my head. E, F, F sharp, G, all using A shapes and all of their variations. A minor shape, A7 shape, A7 flat 5 shape, you know, A add 9 shape, A suspended 4 shape. G shape. These are a little harder to transpose. G sharp, A, B, etc. And they tend to be broken down into a more fragmentary form. So rather than trying to grab this full wide G like that, where your first finger is basically a capo, we'd kind of operate out of the bottom. And I do this all the time, especially if I want to play something that's a little more folksy sounding or Americana-y sounding. You know, if I use an A bar chord, it doesn't really have the same vibe as this. That's operating out of a G shape. Operating out of an E shape. I mean, that's our common 6-string bar chord. E, F, F sharp, G, A, B, so on and so forth. And the variations. E minor, F minor, F minor 7, F7, F major 7, etc., etc. And then the D shape. Again, E flat major 7, E major 7, so on and so forth. So it's not like a complex thing really to wrap your head around. It just becomes getting used to visualizing which chord shape you might want to go into. Now, it's a little restrictive in one sense. There are certainly chords that you can create that don't necessarily easily fall into any one of those particular categories, but it is a super easy way to sort of expand your chord voicings, you know, without having to sit here and go like, okay, well, I know that the E minor chord is E, G, and B. Well, so I got E, G, and B like this, and I got E, G, and B like this, and I got E, G, and B like this, and I got E, G, and B like this, and I got E, G, and B like this, and I got E, G, and B like this, and I got E, G, and B like this, and I got E, G, and B like this, and I got E, G, and B like that. And, you know, though that's probably worthwhile to do, but it makes it a lot easier to go like, okay, I'm trying to find E minor. Well, I know I've got this E minor shape. How can I find it in, you know, a C shape? Well, okay, C shapes are like this, so flip it around like that. Okay, there it is in a C shape. Well, how do I find it in an A shape? Well, I know the A minor shape is like this, so there's an E with an A minor shape. Okay, there's, you know, E minor. I know, okay, how do I find it in let's see, the G shape? Well, okay, G's like that, so G minor's like that, so that means, okay, gotta do, okay, there it is in a G minor shape. And then I got to find it in a D shape. Well, I know the D minor shape is like that. Here's an E. There's a D minor shape. All right. So now right off the bat, I've got five easy voicings essentially for that E minor chord. There are a lot more that you can build, you know, a lot more that kind of start to break outside of that. But that gives you a really, really, really easy outline for finding chord voicings and fingerings, you know, and then you can modify it from there if it's a 7th chord or a 9th chord or whatever. But yeah, it's certainly worth learning just because it's like, it's not as complicated to learn as it's made out to be. Anything else? Or any questions? Any other questions about that? Interesting. This neck pickup does not pick up that harmonic at all. Curious. It's like fine with all the others. Must be in like exactly the right spot. In fact, let me see. Let me tweak that real quick. Let's see. Age modes. Oh, that's not the one we want. We want modes and scales. Modes and chords complete. Edit. MS Paints. Oh Lord, this is a huge image file. Let's shrink that way down. Alright, then let's keep this here. We won't have the room to write it that way. Guitar Pro, if you can get it cheap, it's pretty handy. It has limitations. That's actually what I use to make the basic chart here, is Guitar Pro 7.5. But I had to go into MS Paint to edit it, to add in the words and everything, because Guitar Pro just doesn't give you any options at all as far as that goes, which is really frustrating. You know, it's fine for making like the actual basic tab or notation. I'm still kind of learning all the shortcuts to do it quickly. And I get a little annoyed with stuff like you can't just completely remove the time signature, because for stuff like this, for making these types of charts, we don't need it to be in 4/4, because once it's in a time signature, the software kind of forces everything into that time signature and gets mad at you if you try to add in one more beat than it wants you to add into a measure. When I'm just writing an exercise, I don't care about that kind of stuff. Or when I'm just writing a chart that has no time, I would really like to be able to just write it the way that I want to write it. So it's got some restrictions like that that are frustrating. But on the whole, it's pretty easy to use and seems to do most of what I want it to do. And it's a little more guitar specific. Like I've had Sibelius, Scorch, and some other actual scoring software before, and it's really powerful, but it's not quite as guitar friendly. You have to, if some of them don't even have the option, but if you want to add tabs to staffs and have both at once or stuff like that, they make it a lot more difficult. Let's see, where am I at? That is the subdominant. All right, hold on, I'm finishing up fixing this chart over here. I also got a message on Facebook for composing. Yeah, I'm going to look into, the Scorch was the last thing that I used significantly, but it's been a few years since that computer died for actual composition. Once we get the next computer built, then we will definitely be looking into that again. All right, let's see. So we gotta find. There we go. There's our lettering. Good old MS Paint. I really need to. I really need to download GIMP and learn to use it because it'd probably be a heck of a lot better than friggin' MS Paint. Oh, 10,000 hours in MS Paint, guys. This image looks shopped, I can tell from having seen quite a few shops in my day, and from the pixels. Alright, let's see. Especially since I get like super hung up on making sure things are like pixel perfect aligned, which is a huge pain in the butt to do in MS Paint. It'd be way easier in like real image software of some kind. Alright, let's see. Subdominant. No, go back to where you were. Here we go. Make sure there are no typos. Alright, let's see. Dominant. I'm off by a key. Submediance. Mediance. And then the leading tone. Leading tone. Alright, let me go check this for typos real quick. Submediant, dominant, subdominant, mediant, supertonic, and tonic. Alright, so that looks better. I'm going to re-upload that to the Discord. If I can find Discord, where is it? There it is. It'll be faster in the browser, probably. Apparently GIMP is a banned term by default. Let's see, edit. Edit message, pin message. Delete message. Alright, let's see. Let's get the updated one in here. Harmonized major modes. Alright. There we go. I didn't do the last one, but it's the same as the first one, so it doesn't really matter. Leading tone, tonic, supertonic, mediant, subdominant, dominant, submediant, leading tone. Yeah, okay, sounds good. Inkscape. I'm not familiar with either of those. You know, I've used GIMP off and on in the past. Had a let's say an unofficial version of Photoshop many years ago. Many years ago. But haven't used it in forever either. All right, let's shift. If nobody's got any more questions about the theory lesson tonight or or theory in general, let's just jam for a little while and let's talk about dialing in your sound. Since that was something that you had a question about, Graham. And the detailed mechanics are obviously going to be different because everybody has a different rig, but there are some general ideas that'll carry over. Uh, let's see. Let me edit the title here. Can I edit the title in here? It'd be a hell of a lot faster. Got to be some way. Yeah, there we go. All right. Yeah, just set gain to 11. Scoop the mids. Gain all the way up. Bass and treble all the way up. No mids at all. Not generally the ideal way to approach it. Inkscape is vector based. Folkso. Is it Folkso? Is it Fosho? But so I mean the first thing you really want to do is you want to dial in, your basic amp sound. In this case, I'm using a super, super, super clean amp. Now, if you're using an amp that has multiple channels, you're going to have a little bit different experience. And if depending on whether or not you have shared or separate EQ for those channels, you're going to have a different experience. The way I'm set up at the moment is with a very, very clean amp, then with a drive pedal in front that has its own EQ, its own gain controls and everything, so I can treat it like a second channel of the amplifier, essentially. So this is my dry sound. No pedal engaged at all. It's just a very, very clean and warm sort of tone. And again, if you want to see what guitar amps or pedals I'm using, we have commands for that you can use in chat. Right now, this is a sort of vintage styled amp. It does not have an effects loop. Now, normally, if one of the other rigs that I use pretty regularly on the stream has an effects loop, and I'll run usually my delay and reverb in the effects loop. In this case, we're getting reverb from the amp. It has a spring reverb in it, a tube-driven spring reverb, and then I have a delay pedal and a drive pedal, a multi-mode drive pedal in front. This drive pedal has 8 different types of drive and boost in them, and we'll explore some of those here shortly. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the basic idea with effects order is thinking like, okay, whatever is last in chain is going to do whatever it does to everything in front of it, right? So if you put a distortion pedal at the end of your chain, it's going to distort everything in front of it. So if you put a reverb in front of it, you're going to get distorted reverb. If you put a delay in front of it, you're going to get distorted delay. That same thing also occurs if you're getting distortion from an amp channel and your pedal is in front. So if you switch to the distortion channel of your amp and you have a reverb in front of the amp, like running from your guitar into the pedal, into the amplifier, you're going to get a distorted reverb sound. And sometimes that's really cool. I mean, that's, you're a big part of your shoegaze sound in particular. But in other cases, it's not necessarily what you want because it tends to kind of blow the sound out. You don't really hear your effect clearly like you would like to. So there's kind of a standard-ish effects order, which is that things like reverb are going to be at the very end. Delay is usually going to be close to the reverb, like right before or right after the reverb. Most people want the reverb to behave like an amp reverb, which means it's going to come pretty late in the chain, so they'll leave it absolutely last, but that's kind of up to you, which one you want to have last, right? Then in front of that, you're going to have, as a general rule, your modulation. So things like chorus, flanger, phaser, tremolo. Though some tremolos work better at the very end, some tremolos work better at the beginning. It's going to vary from pedal to pedal, and you'll have to sort of experiment and see where they like to be, right? So, but you'll have your chorus, flanger, phaser, all that kind of stuff in front of the delay. And then in front of that, you're usually going to have your things, your overdrives, boosts, compressors, that kind of stuff. And then at the very, very, very beginning of the chain, you're usually going to have a fuzz pedal if you use fuzz. Most fuzzes, especially vintage style fuzzes, like to see the guitar input pretty much straight up. If you run other things into them, their circuits can be picky, their input impedance can be picky, and they can behave kind of oddly with other things in front of them. So if you've got, like a vintage fuzz face style pedal, you probably want it to be first in chain. Now, these aren't absolutely set in stone rules. These are just kind of general ideas, as to where things you tend to get sort of maximized or as intended performance out of these things. Mixing those orders up can produce some really cool results sometimes. They can also produce kind of suboptimal results where the pedals don't really work right. So you'll have to experiment with your particular pedals and see which ones kind of jive with which. But if you sit me down and I'm going to make, a 5-pedal board, then I'm going to have my fuzz pedal at the beginning. Then I'm going to have, probably like a clean boost sort of pedal with some EQ control somewhere, Then I'm going to have my overdrive pedal. Then I'm going to have my delay pedal. Then I'm going to have my reverb pedal. If I were using, let's say, a volume pedal in that rig, sometimes I want that volume pedal at or close to the very beginning. Other times I want that volume pedal at the very end. Depending on where you put it, it will interface and interact really, really differently. So if I put it at the very end, it acts like a volume down for my entire rig, for every pedal. So I could have every pedal on and then pull the volume all the way down, cut it off. So I'm using it basically like a master volume pot like that. If I have it in front of other stuff, though, I can use it to kind of control the gain of those things in different ways. So let's say let's get like a kind of moderately overdriven sound. Right? If I bring my guitar volume down, I'm reducing how much input signal the circuit sees, so I'm going to reduce the gain of the circuit. I'm going to get a cleaner sound. Some pedals clean up really well, other pedals don't clean up at all. It all depends on the individual circuit. Same thing can be said with amps. Some amps clean up amazingly well. You can go from incredibly distorted to almost crystal clean just with your guitar volume or a volume pedal, while others will almost not react to it at all. Like they'll just go like distorted, 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 off. So let's say I could set up like a rhythm sound like this with my guitar volume down or my volume pedal down. And if I want to bring it up, just roll my volume back up. Let's get on a humbucker kind of sound. Roll it down. Roll it up, down. If your volume pedal's at the front of your rig, it's going to have that effect, basically. It's going to allow you to push or pull everything after it, from including your individual pedals. So you might have, a pedal set up for heavy overdrive. You keep the volume pedal down at just a little bit to pull some of that gain back. Then when you go to a big chorus or a solo or something you want your gain, you push your volume pedal all the way up. And it's just like turning your guitar volume all the way up. So that one can kind of be at the beginning or at the end. It's usually not stuck in the middle somewhere unless there's some really specific, routing you need for your rig. But as a rule, reverbs and delays last, modulation kind of in the middle, things like distortions next, and then things like fuzzes and boosts and compressors more towards the beginning of the rig, usually fuzzes at the very beginning. Like I said, the important thing to remember is that whatever is last is going to affect everything in front of it when it's turned on. So you have to just do a little bit of logistic work, sit down and think like, okay, well, I don't want, I don't want my reverb to be distorted, so I need to make sure my reverb is after this. Or, I want my delay, I want the filter to affect my delay. So if you've got like, say, a phaser or a filter that sweeps back and forth and you want to hear it sweeping across the repeats of your delays, then put it after your delay. So you're using, is that you're talking about in the Rocksmith All right, so a tube screamer, because I remember the HW100 was like the high watt type amp in the Rocksmith thing, right? Zoom G1, okay. So a tube screamer is a fairly low gain overdrive, relatively speaking. Now, there are a ton of modded variations, you know, like probably like 75% of overdrive pedals are some variation of a tube screamer. But a tube screamer tends to be on the low gain side, like low to medium gain, and it has a lot of the clean sound mixed back in, which you can hear pretty clearly. So let's say, like, here's my clean sound. If I switch to the tube screamer in this circuit, let's say I turn the gain down even more, you hear a lot of that clean still there. It's still present in the sound. You know, and the gain is almost kind of sitting next to it. That helps give you a lot of articulation. It helps you still really hear the string and the sound of the guitar very well. But if you said you wanted more kind of like an 80s sort of sound, unless you're playing, Stevie Ray Vaughan or something like that, it's probably not the sound you're going for necessarily. Not the sound that you mean when you talk about an 80s type of sound. It tends to have a very pronounced sort of mid-range hump too. It cuts the lows off pretty dramatically and then gives you a big bump in the mids. So if we go from clean to, we can hear that big low cut. Shift the mids so we get this kind of vocal. And this circuit has a little more gain than most tube screamers will. But it's still kind of honky, right? You're going to want to look for something. Let me see if I can find the list of the types of drives that are in the G1. Let's see, Zoom G1. And then I can recommend, is it the G1 4? So there's a G1 4 and a G1 X4. Oh, X has got the expression pedal on it. All right, let's see. Specs and details. Scroll. All right, there's got to be, somewhere on here, there's got to be a list of its sounds. Maybe in the manual. Oh my gosh, this is a goofy website. Oh, what's in the box? Manual. Support and downloads. Okay. There we go. But yeah, it'll probably have, I would bet it's got, like Kaz mentioned in the Discord, I would bet it's got a rat type pedal in it. That's a good bet. Support and download manual. All right, quick guide operation manual. There we go. But you're going to want something that has less of a clean sound blended in, and you're going to want something that's higher gain as a rule, something that's more aggressive than a tube screamer. Okay, naming of parts, loading batteries, editing effects, managing patches. So let's look here, edit mode. Selecting effects, changing effect types, changing effect order. Now, Come on now. It's got to be something. Got to be a list somewhere. Because it says stomp mode, patch levels, patches and breaks, audio, character, and output. Yeah, we got that. We got that. Do they really not have a list of all of the effect types? That's crazy. That's crazy. All right. Maybe someone else has got a list somewhere. Let's look effects. Just Google effects list. Nothing. That's hard to believe. Yeah, there's got to be some way to do it. Because it's sitting here. It talks about how it's got 70 plus, 70 plus different effects that you can swap in and out and use as individual pedals, right? But so you're going to want something, something like a rat, or let's say, let me get. Yeah, they tend to, since they can't use the official names, they tend to use kind of like, you know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more types of names. So if it's a rat, it's usually going to be rodents or vermins or mouse or something to that effect. Though one of the more interesting names I saw for a rat clone was called the lumberjack, because the really early rats are all signed by the people who built them, and they all had nicknames, and one of the guys' name was like lumberjack or something like that. It's kind of a cool nod to rat nerds, right? But you look for something like that, or something that says high gain. If you have a pedal, or even an amp mode, because doesn't that have different amp models? So you can do, you know, like a vintage Marshall style amp model, or you can do, a Mesa style amp model, something like that. In some cases, it may be easier just to change the amp model. Perhaps. That could be a reference to the red channel on a Bogner Ecstasy. Let's see. I'm surprised. Usually somebody on the internet, even if the manual doesn't have it, someone has made a list of all of them, just, because. But they do. Zoom also made a really excellent high gain pedal called the Hyper Lead, and they put that sound into some of their multi effects too. If that's in there, that would be pretty much the perfect like 80s lead sound. Because I know they made this series of pedals for a few years, and I've actually had all four of them. I still have two of them. One called the Tri-Metal and one called the Hyper Lead, and both of those were in some of their other multi effects. And if those are there, then those will definitely be more to your taste. So in this case, like in the one that I'm using, here is that Tube Screamer sound. If I dial up to like a proper high gain sound, you hear how much more aggressive that becomes. Start balancing my levels a little more. we don't hear that clean kind of kicking through anymore. We start to get more saturation under the fingers. Bring our mids down a little. High gain throttle. That might be like a Mesa throttle box. But you're going to want to look for something. I mean, explore them. You've got a whole bunch in there, but just look for something that's higher gain than the tube screamer is going to be. Right, and start to dial it in. It's going to interact with your amp, you know, or with your amp model in this case in different ways too. You know, if you have a very, very clean amp model, if it's set to not distort, it's going to behave one way. If your amp is set up, you know, the amp inside of the system is set up to have sort of an overdriven or dirty tone already, then you're going to really, really amplify that. In some cases, it can produce kind of weird results if you stack a whole lot of gain into an already dirty amp. In other cases, it can push it in interesting ways. You're probably going to want to, I think that has the ability to choose your cab model too. If you can choose your cab model, you're probably going to want a 412 cab model. Right? And then just start tweaking your sound. You know, EQ is to taste. As a rule, I tend to cut bass, but if you're playing at low volume and you're playing through headphones or something like that, you probably want more bass than I would normally dial in. When you play live with a lot of distortion, if you use too much bass, it tends to overwork your amp and your speakers and tends to make your sound kind of flabby. But if you're just playing through headphones, you can probably crank it up a lot more. Then you'll want generally a slight dip in the mids. You know, a full mid scoop like we were joking about earlier, like the V-shaped EQ model, that's going to give you more kind of like your Master of Puppets sort of thrash metal kind of sound. Usually that can be not the greatest sound for lead though. Gives you a really tight and aggressive rhythm tone. But when you go to play solos, it'll sound kind of empty. Now, if you like earlier stuff, if you're more kind of like 80s hard rock, then you want a little more mids. You know, if you're playing Van Halen, you'll definitely want more mids than you would if you were playing Metallica. But the EQ is going to be to taste. Then instead of using an analog delay, which tends to be dark, relatively dark, and have, well, on that one, they probably don't have a time limitation because it's being emulated. It's being done digitally. But switch to like a digital delay. Preferably one with like a little bit of modulation. This digital delay is going to give you a more bright and clear sound, and as the 80s went on, most players started to transition away from the analog delays into the digital because you got more control, you got longer time with less noise, you got the ability to modulate them in more dramatic ways in most cases, and it gives you that more kind of processed sound. Because typically when we're thinking like 80s lead guitar, we're actually thinking a pretty processed and polished sort of tone, relatively speaking. So I'm going to add a digital delay here, the Caroline Kilobyte, which is voiced specifically to sound like an 80s rack unit. All right, and we're going to get, let's up our delay time some. Let's get a little bit of modulation. Bring the level down a hair. Right, so just that combination of a higher gain drive sound and that digital delay starts getting us there. Now if I add, let's see, I've got a digital reverb over here. If I add that digital reverb, that's going to give us like another level. Let's see. So if you have the ability, to do your gain pedal, then your delay pedal, if you can add in a reverb pedal, especially a kind of cold sounding reverb, then we'll really be talking. All right, so I'm going to add, actually the reverb pedal we use the most, the Red Panda Context, because it's part of its algorithms are modeled on an 80s rack reverb. Plugged in, bring your volume back up. Alright, so here's our sound, just gaining delay, and a little bit of reverb from the amp, not enough to worry about turning it down. Alright, so I'm going to go over here. I'm going to turn on this, I'm going to set it to fairly bright reverb and give it kind of a long trail or long tail. And so now we're getting that kind of Lukather sort of 80s movie soundtrack kind of lead guitar tone. So the next step from there, go grab another pedal out of the cabinet real quick. Would be to add a chorus. So far we've got a high gain drive, we've got a digital delay, we've got a digital reverb. We're going to incorporate a chorus pedal. Right, so you're going to run into there. And flanger would work well too. Phaser is a little bit less common in the 80s. A little bit. Alright, so we're back to our clean sound. Alright, so now bringing in that chorus tone. So you will almost never hear a clean tone in the 80s that does not have some kind of chorus or flanger, that some kind of modulation on it. In this in particular case, this is an Ibanez chorus from the 80s. Right? And so then we're going to combine that with our gain tone. Lower my reverb tail just a little bit. How's the Top Gun theme go? Oh man. I knew it at one point. Well, I gotta look it up now. Let's see, that's YouTube Top Gun theme song. Thanks for that. It's all your fault. Now, ideally, you would probably run a compressor in this rig too, but you know, you probably don't really need one, since you're kind of doing it all inside the multi-effects. Top Gun anthem. Ah, that's it. All right. All right, we got we got a little too much reverb. Let's darken the reverb up, reduce the tail a little. mix down a hair. Da 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 da. Slightly brighter tones, so it's dialing a little more high end. A little fewer repeats on the delay. There we go, a little darker reverb sound. So where's that bar dip come in? Nope. This is where that note went. Didn't change keys. That's a really weird modulation. Don't. That's bizarre. Why does it change keys that way? That's an interesting one to analyze. So we're starting off in C. It drops down to friggin'. Drops down to F sharp. It's like a tritone modulation. Really, really, really abrupt. A little minor harmonization underneath it. That's Steve Stevens playing guitar on it too, from Billy Idol's band, using his signature hammer. Then back to C. Right, so yeah, that's actually pretty easy, all things considered. Alright, so we're starting off here on the C on the 5th fret on the G string, then coming down to G 3rd fret on the E string. And then 6th fret F on the B. 6 5 6 5 3 3. Then 5 3 5. Up to 6. You have a little bar dip on the 6. Look at the guys playing like a full-length grand piano in the video, but what you hear is like cheeseball Yamaha FX7, like or a DX7, like electric piano. All right, so now he's moved a little farther up the neck, so instead of playing down here. It has its moments. It has its moments. But anyway, so as you can kind of hear, once we start stacking up this combination of effects, we're pretty much dead on for this kind of sound. Like I I said, all we're really missing is a compressor, but I don't feel like dragging a compressor out because I don't really have an 80s sounding compressor. Uh, Now, if I change to a guitar with a hotter bridge pickup, in fact, we can do that. Let's do that. We can do that really quickly. But, we'll change to something with a screaming hot bridge pickup. So if your sound is still very muddy, dial down your bass. You start dialing down your bass. Kind of set your mid range in the middle. At set your treble in the middle. Dial down the lows. Dial down the gain some. If you crank the gain just all the way up, in a lot of cases, it's going to just mush out. You have to sort of find a balance. This bar is a pain in the butt to get out. All right, I'm gonna grab a different guitar. Just a sec. But the higher you have your bass, the higher you have your low end, the more you're going to kind of like overload the whole setup. All right. It's time for the old RG760. Haven't had this one out in a few weeks. This guitar is from 1988. Oh, there's my pick that I dropped earlier. Hanging out down here. Go back. Right, and so pay really careful attention to where you have the mix set on your effects too. So on your delay, reverb, anything like that. Start with the mix all the way down and then just very slowly bring it up. The back plate for this guy is actually kind of hard to find, or the control panel plate. I actually don't want the trim back plate on it. I like to leave those open. Alright, so this guitar's got a much more mid-rangey and aggressive bridge pickup. You can hear it kind of pushing the whole thing harder. But make sure you start, go all the way back to your amp model, your amp and cab model, and make sure you have them sounding, the way that you want, whether it be clean or dirty. Uh, get them balanced out, get your EQ kind of tailored for the sound that you want. Then start adding one pedal at a time. As I said, just start blending them in just a little bit at a time till you find just the right equilibrium. Because if you have your mix cranked way up on the delay or reverb, that's going to make everything sound muddy kind of by default. It'd be just like turning the mix way up on the reverb here, and now suddenly I get these completely buried kind of sounds, which are fun for when we're making ambient music, but not so much when we're doing this. Let's see if I can get that. Got to get my pinky to go down. I keep wanting to move both fingers. I'm trying to move just the pinky down one fret at a time while I tap the same note. It's all just scale shapes, right? All I'm doing is connecting, I'm following the formula, in this case, so the E Aeolian, the E minor scale. taking it, instead of moving it in a box like that, I'm going, connecting, say, two of the box shapes together. And then I'm connecting a third one. Then a fourth one. Then a fifth one. So the whole time, like mentally, I'm just sort of connecting the dots. I'm going like, okay, I'm at this point in the scale, so the next tone is here. And eventually your fingers and ears just kind of find that. Like they get to where you don't have to tell them consciously to do it as much. Your hand automatically knows like where I can find E minor tones. Well, like when I'm actually doing that stuff, my brain's not really thinking that much about it. I've thought about it a lot in the past as I was learning it. But, like I said, sooner or later, your ears and hands kind of catch up. And so you start thinking more in terms of like phrases, Like if I want a phrase that goes, I'm taking just slower phrases, slower ideas, and accelerating them. I mean, not really. You should be able to dial in something, something that works with basically any guitar. You just have to spend the time tweaking all of your settings. But if your problem is sounding muddy, it's almost always too much bass, too much gain, or the mix is turned up too much on whichever effects you're using. Almost always. Uh-oh. All right. My nose is starting to bleed a little bit, which is not good. So I'm going to have to wrap it up. We're at over 3 hours anyway. Thanks for you guys for hanging out. I'll talk to you in the Discord. All right. See you later.